Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. Today we're going over my top 8 Vegito list from the CGU 1K event. Took place over the weekend. If you haven't seen my meta breakdown, check that out from Monday. Really fun event, and I chose to play this deck, so I'm going to go over it, talk about everything I liked about it, talk about everything I didn't like about it. There were a few things of those as well. So guys, if you are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss a video. If you guys want to help the channel out, there are many ways to do that down in the description. Check out those links. Check out the Patreon, the Gemmy app if you want your one-on-one coaching with yours truly, as well as your cross-world competitive content. If you guys want to buy any sleeves, deck boxes, binders, use deck protection down below. And if you want to buy any of the cards you see in today's video, be sure to use my link in the description to TCG Player. That being said, we will get started. So you'll see here I have the ARG Summer playmat. This is actually a playmat I got for topping this event as well. Pretty cool actually, because I wasn't able to make the ARG Summer thing at my locals. I don't even remember what came up. It was probably a tournament I traveled to or something, but it was cool to get this mat at the tournament as well. So I played Vegito. Basically on the front side, attack, draw a card, same thing on the back. His auto says when a blue battle card or a blue unison is removed from the board, you get to awaken, draw 2 cards. Otherwise you can awaken at 4 life, on tap 1, draw 1. I actually never awoken at 4 life. I always luckily, got a battle card to awaken with, but it wasn't always turn 1, and that's one of the things we'll talk about with the deck when we get into it. But then we have Vegito, Godhood Transcended. So he is kind of like a powerhouse. So attack, draw a card. He has the ability to turn any unison into a game-ending threat, pay to give him triple strike, and you'll use that effect a lot. Actually, I use that effect a lot for attacking into my opponent's unison. If it had a lot of markers on it, just swing Zeno into the unison, give triple strike. That worked out quite well. Besides that, though, it is game-ending power, and the auto once per turn when a blue battle card or a blue unison is removed, you untap 1, you draw 1. You want to get that effect off as much as you possibly can. So one of the main differences between Vegito and Zamasu, like the main deck is going to be like 10 cards different, maybe it's going to be very similar, but this leader, he kind of cycles advantage. Like he turns a blocker into a draw 1 and an untapped energy, whereas Zamasu can plus a little bit harder because you're getting the dual attack and you're drawing 2 times every single time you attack. But this leader is a lot more defensive, and I wanted to play this into a field of like Gotenks, for example. I knew Gotenks would be quite popular at this tournament, and this is a very good matchup against Gotenks, so that felt pretty good. But Vegex was kind of tough to deal with. Bean doesn't necessarily help against Vegex all too much. Nothing helps against Vegex too much when they have, Bibbidi super combos. But besides that, definitely a good position deck for the weekend, but there's some things about it I'm not a huge fan of. I did talk about those on Monday. I'll talk about it again a little bit here. But real quick, I thought it'd be kind of cool if I showed you guys my deck box that I've actually been using for like years on end, even since my Yu-Gi-Oh days. Like, it's just my favorite deck box that I have like covered in stickers from all the places I traveled to. Like when I went to California, for example, got the In-N-Out Burger sticker, got the cool little Gotenks sticker. He's looking like a savage right there. Just pretty neat. I always use a deck box for a deck I take to an event. So besides that, we'll get into the main deck. So we'll start off with the blue extra cards. Pretty simple. We played for Senzu-Bean. You should just play it. This deck doesn't do too much aggressively. You will use an offensive Senzu-Bean once in a while, but you can play 3 if you really want to. This is a 52 card list, so you can trim it down if you really want to, but I liked it a lot actually. You do definitely need Bean for the decks that play Obuni, so keeping that in mind, it was kind of important for that. We are playing 4 Dimension Magic. I definitely would not cut down on this. I'm also playing 1 All Too Easy. This is a card that we play for Invoker. You are definitely a slower deck, so sometimes Invoker can get to the late game pretty uninterrupted. So when they're able to do that, you want the All Too Easy in your hand, because if they use the leader to look at your hand and they see you have negates or Victory Strike, or maybe even like Trunks counterplay, if they hit this out of your hand, well, you can still negate the Victory Strike. So that worked out really well. I wouldn't chop down those negates at all. Now here comes the really important stuff. We're playing for Dr. Rhoda. You really want to see this on turn 1, and that's one of my turn-offs with the deck after the weekend. Now, I will say, like, I definitely saw it turn 1 more often than not. I'll usually full mulligan for this or the Zeno Unison, which we'll talk about in a second. But the games that you don't see it, it's really hard to play the game. But I will say, it's even harder to play the game when you don't draw into the Zeno Cosmic Unison. And that's probably my biggest turn-off with the deck. I mean, don't get me wrong. I talked about it on Monday. The deck is incredibly powerful. Blue is one of the strongest colors in the game right now, but for mid-range to need such a specific curve, at least for me, it's a little bit of a turn-off. I mean, that's usually more for like combo decks, aggro decks, and control decks. They really want to see a very specific curve and play the game a very specific way. I want to be able to play mid-range, adaptively, right? I want to be able to adapt to all the different situations. But if you don't see, Piggy on 1 or a Zeno on 2, it's very difficult to play the game. So that was one thing I just wanted to mention there. But otherwise, this guy killed a lot of my opponents. Getting that triple strike in there definitely won me a lot of games. So you don't always need to go into a bigger unison, especially when you can use his ability, more than once per turn if you have enough energy or the Senzu Beans to untap. and do that kind of thing. Obuni, like I was saying before, very specific curve. You want to see Piglet on 1, you want to see Zeno on 2, and you want to see Obuni on pretty much every turn 3. And when you can manage to do that, the deck is pretty oppressive. The deck is kind of crazy in that regard, but the games you don't get there, it does kind of hurt. Like, to be honest, you know, as broken of a card as Obuni is, a turn 4 Obuni isn't, you know, the hardest thing for your opponent to get over. So just with that in mind, I wanted to say that about the deck. Again, specific curve, it's of course incredibly powerful. But one of the cards in the deck that everyone kind of looked at and was like, wow, what does that do? Android 16, mechanical prowess. It really does work perfectly with the deck. When one of your energy goes away from the Zeno Unison, you get to play this Android 16 for free. So like I was mentioning before, you want to get your Vegito effect to draw a card, untap an energy on your opponent's turn. You want to use that as often as you possibly can. And this guy coming down for free, he makes you feel really safe. You know, when Zeno chops your energy away at the end of the turn, he comes out, you feel quite safe, and that is very good. I almost wish I played another 1-drop blocker in the deck. You know, Jill Call, a lot of people play 4 Piglet and 2 Jill Call. He's a revenge U11 blocker, but you know, the deck space is tight. Like I mentioned before, it's 52 cards. I really didn't want to go above that number. So keeping that in mind, you know, there are some people, like I think Anthony Figueroa played Jill Call in his main deck over the weekend. He played Vegito as well. So it is definitely a good card for sure. Then we're playing 4 Trunks God Sealing Technique. I mean, you know, this is pretty obvious. Like, you're gonna save it a lot of times for when you're going for game as well, like especially against red. You want to stop those topos, but besides that, like having Zeno Unison, having the 16 blocker, and then having this in hand, you definitely feel quite safe. But again, if you don't see the cards you need, it is a little bit problematic. And this is not a leader that, like, you know, draws some of the most cards in the game, right? Like even like Harudegarn draws more cards than this leader does. So sometimes you don't quite get there, which is a little bit unfortunate. Even like Gotenks with the yellow Unison, it filters a lot. So this deck is a little weak in terms of sometimes, you know, being able or not being able to see the cards you need. Just wanted to mention, you know, the pros and cons of the deck. Can be oppressive, can fall behind if you don't see things early enough. So 2 Gotenks Unison, I thought this was the perfect number. Some of my teammates recommended siding a 3rd copy. I just never felt like I would bring it in. So 2 was really good. I actually didn't use this guy to end games a lot. Most of the time Zeno was my game-winning Unison. This guy actually was very, very clutch for coming down and removing battle cards of barrier. That came up a lot over the course of the weekend. There was one matchup in particular, I think it was actually against yellow Gotenks, where I was starting to get overwhelmed in board presence. Like I mentioned before, it is a very good matchup for Vegito, but if they can get, you know, a lot of Raiders on the board and the Gotenks fusion on the board, you know, if you don't have Trunks in hand or your Unison has 2 low markers, getting this guy on the field to wipe the board was actually quite good. So I liked him a lot for that. It's unfortunate you can't get markers, but it is what it is. 2 at all cost Vegeta. To be honest, I think it came up like one solid weekend. I wasn't in love with the card. I do get the idea, like Gotenks in particular, if you see all the cards you need to see in the first 2 turns of the game, they're really never going to do damage to you. So having at all costs for that is quite good. But again, it just really requires you to hit that specific curve. So I think just for me, not my favorite playstyle, but it was quite good. 2 Turning the Tide. It's really funny. I messaged my teammates and I was like, I think it was like round 3, and I said, this card is absolutely useless. I was playing against like Vegex, like Gotenks, and those matchups, like this card doesn't come up all too much, but then like in the later half of the tournament, I did actually use it a lot more, which made it a little bit more relevant, which was pretty good. You know, obviously when you could drop it, it's pretty devastating for your opponent, but honestly, you not having a hand as well is kind of crazy. So 1 Mr. Booth Mischievous, I really just want things to do with my energy when I use Dimension Magic. You know, untapping 2 Dimension Magic is incredibly powerful, but if you don't have anything to do with that energy, well, you know, why'd you even reset energy in the first place, right? So I wanted to play 2 of this, but I did have to make room in the deck, so I ended up playing 1, and honestly, I really, really like this card. Just having another negate was always very solid. So now to the non-blue cards. We have 3 Sand Instincts. Unfortunately, I think in this deck you have to play it. It's probably the next best turn 2 play when you don't see Zeno. You just really want to draw 2 cards. Of course, there are like budget alternatives, but I'm not sure if anything will be quite as good as this card in the deck, but only 3. Then we have 4 Zamasu super combo for our blue yellow. I mean, it really is one of the best super combos you can play. We paired this with 3 copies of Goku Hit Supreme Alliance. Now, it is really unfortunate when you hit these off of your Zeno Unison when you're trying to ramp. That did happen a considerable amount. Another reason why I don't love this deck as much as I used to. It just, a lot of unfortunate things can happen when you're playing it, but when you go off, and it's really hard to lose those games where that happens. But besides that, the card's just too high value. You really should play them. Then we're playing 2 copies of Infernal Villainy Cell. Shout out to my teammate Andy for, you know, realistically most of this deck. You know, I put a lot of time into Vegito when it was first spoiled, but then I kind of fell off of it for Gotenks. But he recommended 2 of these, and I love this card a lot. Like I said before, I want to do things with my energy when I use Dimension Magic, and Cell was great for that. Now on to the black cards. We have 2 Secret Identity Mass Sand. Card was amazing all weekend. I really don't want to play decks without removal. I've said that in a lot of deck profiles, and this card offers excellent removal. Then we have 1 copy of the SM4 Gogeta Secret Rare. I am starting to hate this card more and more. The more I use it, the more I honestly just dislike it. There's a lot of times where it's just not going to end the game outright. It really just isn't. I mean, you know, ripping 2 out of your opponent's hand and killing 2 guys on their board, it's not the most crazy thing. Even if they're at like 2 or 3 life, it's really just not that crazy. I would really not recommend playing this card. Maybe Smoke Dragon, maybe Negative Energy Dragon Balls, but the more I play this card, the more I just don't like it. The real MVP, quote unquote secret rare, was Fu Shrouded Mystery. This card just comes out, ends games, and my teammates were not playing it. I just don't know why. The card's so crazy. Not to, like, you know, throw shade at them, but yeah, I definitely am happy I included it. 1 more copy of Fu in the side deck, again, just for those matchups where you needed to see it. Like matchups where Fu and Turning the Tide are really good. You just want the extra copies. Then we have 3 copies of Android 21, the Destructive Villain. So this is for go wide decks. You know, sometimes, like I said before, when you don't hit your curve, Go tanks can get away from you. A lot of the Raiders War Cries, a lot of other things on the board, and other matchups too, like against my Skilless in top 8. Like, I just wanted to whiteboard every turn. And this guy does remove your energy, but when you have Xeno Unison, it doesn't really matter. You're losing the energy at the end of the turn anyway. Then we have 3 Koitsukai. He came in a lot. He came in against mirror matches, came in against Gotenks. Like, any matchup I knew would potentially play a rival, this guy was really great. And it also is good against red for Topo and things like that. I didn't play against any red, but it is quite good. We have 3 copies of Vegeta Savior of the Future. This was mostly for Invoker, which I did not play all weekend, luckily, because that matchup is quite annoying. But the idea behind this card is you play it out on turn 1, you start attacking with it. A lot of times they don't want to attack you as Invoker because they don't want you to flip over. But if they don't attack into the Vegeta, they're either taking a double strike every turn or having to defend against it, or they have to choose to attack into it. So they're kind of like in a lose-lose situation, which is what I liked about the card a lot. We have 1 more copy of Sand Instincts just for hand control matchups. I did bring it in a few times, but I didn't really play against much green, so it actually wasn't super needed. Like, there were actually a lot of games where I would side out the 3rd copy of Sand Instincts. So maybe you can even get away in the deck with playing 2 copies. Maybe if the reprints get a little bit cheaper, you could think to do that. 1 more copy of All Too Easy, once again, for Victory Strike, and just other matchups I wanted more negates. But if there are really other matchups I wanted more negates, that was pretty much going to be the Max Power Kamehameha, one of, I think, the only Anniversary Box cards I'm playing in the deck. This card is just insane. I mean, it's a great coverall side deck card, just extra negates, like, especially with Dimension Magic, using up that extra energy. Getting it back to your hand actually feels incredibly powerful. You know, in this deck you do Overwhelm, but again, you're exchanging blockers for drawing cards, so you're filling your drop area pretty well. And then when Xeno, like, you know, sacks an energy, you get your drop area filled up as well. So getting these back to hand is quite good. This was a good card against Shenron. Also has applications against Gotenks, other yellow decks that just cheat things into play. Definitely quite good. So guys, that was pretty much the deck profile. That was the 52 card main deck and the 15 card side deck. So definitely in the comments below what you think about the deck. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you next time.